Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you.
So my name is Elizabeth Repp. I also go by Ellie, and I am the Eco Healthy Childcare Program Associate. I have been with the Children's Environmental Health Network for almost 2 years now, and I'm based out of the Washington, D.C. area. Jess, I'll pass it to you if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Sure. I'm Jessica Price. I'm the Eco Healthy Child Care Program Manager. I'm based out of Fort Worth, Texas, and I've been with Children's Environmental Health Network for about 2.5 years now. Go ahead,
Awesome.
Ellie.
Yeah, so we're very excited to be speaking with you today. We're going to be talking about different ways that we can mitigate heat-related illness and heat safety for children, particularly around outdoor time and, during the hotter months when we may see stress related to heat. So we're going to be talking about different low-cost ways that we can avoid injury and illness when it comes to heat. So just to give a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing, we're going to be giving a high-level overview of what children's environmental health is, what our organization does, and what the Eco Healthy Child Care Program is. Then we're going to dive into extreme heat, safer sunscreens and bug repellents, outdoor interventions, outdoor play ideas, and staying safe during poor air quality days. So, just to give you a little bit of background about who the Children's Environmental Health Network is and what we do, we've been around for over 30 years. We'll be celebrating our 35th year in 2027. And we specifically look at the intersection of health and environmental hazards like pesticides, toxic chemicals, and consumer products and air pollution, and how that all relates to children's health specifically. We promote research that looks into preventing exposures to environmental hazards. We advocate for policies that will protect the child population from these hazards. We also recently released a report on ways to reduce lead exposure in early learning environments. And we specifically look at best practices for decreasing exposure to different environmental hazards specific to childcare. So, to provide you with a definition of what children's environmental health is, if you're unfamiliar with that term, it essentially is looking at children's surroundings, including the air that they breathe, the food and water that they consume, as well as where they live, learn, and play, and how that all comes together to influence health. So there is mounting evidence that points to environment as a significant driver of health that affects health in many different ways. And so our overall goal is to take the science and distill it down in a way that is easily accessible and give people realistic expectations and best practices for how they can improve their environment and therefore the health of the children that they are either caring for or related to. And so um, that's our overall message and goal. And so we also acknowledge that there's, a whole variety of different factors that go into making up someone's health. Things like healthcare quality, healthcare access, social and economic factors, even genetics. But we kind of have environment on the outside of these concentric circles because so many of these different factors all play off of environment. And environment is often something that we have the most control over. We can change what's in our homes. We can change the different types of foods we consume or what we're bringing into care spaces. And so that's why we specifically focus on environment. We also prioritize children as a population because children are often more vulnerable to environmental hazards. This is due to, their bodies developing. They consume, eat, drink, and breathe more pound per pound than adults do, meaning that for how small their bodies are, they're taking in more air, water, and food proportionally to adults. Um, their bodily systems are also still developing, and so they're still, getting better at filtering out some of the hazards that our bodies are a little bit better at filtering out. They also have behaviors that cause them to be at higher risk, being lower to the ground and crawling, hand to mouth behavior, all things that potentially could allow for more exposure to different chemicals. And so this is, something that we like to emphasize is that children are not just little adults and that it's important to acknowledge that they are at higher risk for a lot of these different reasons. Which is why we created and developed the Eco Healthy Childcare program. So it's a national program that's managed by the Children's Environmental Health Network, and we specifically work with childcare professionals to reduce environmental hazards like lead and pesticides, and this is through a self-audit checklist of 35 best practices that are all meant to be low or no cost and easy to implement in facilities. So we're also informed by our National Advisory Committee, which is made up of a variety of different experts, including pediatricians, experts in the childcare field, and experts in environmental health as well. We also have a great repository of free resources available on our website. And so this includes fact sheets, which are one-pager documents with just high level, all the information you need to know about a specific topic. You can see the topics listed there on the left. We also have our frequently asked questions. And so these are kind of developed out of the questions that we get from providers um, about topics that they'd like to learn more about related to environmental health. Some of our best resources have come naturally out of this way because providers ask really great questions about what they can do. And we have policy recommendations for childcare providers. So these are sample policies on things that we'd recommend, such as anti-idling or, around certain plastics. We're thinking about also creating a policy around extreme weather and heat. So all of those topics. And then we also have a blog where we try to regularly post about, our resources and different topic areas that maybe our resources don't yet cover. And so with that, I'm going to move into talking about extreme heat. So I'm sure as many of you have felt, there have been an increase in the number of heat waves, particularly that it's tripled since the 1960s. Um, Record-breaking heat is very prominent. In July 2023, it was the hottest month recorded globally. And extreme heat causes more than 1,500 deaths in the United States. And this also has an economic impact as heat waves in the United States cost the US economy $100 billion per year due to loss in labor productivity. So this is a real problem, and we are seeing it increase in severity and frequency. And as you can imagine, there are a number of health effects related to heat waves when it comes to children. So, exposure to extreme heat can lead to exhaustion, dehydration, heat stroke, and exacerbate existing respiratory issues. So, with children that maybe have asthma, it can maybe trigger some of those asthma-related symptoms. Heat extremes can also worsen health risks from chronic conditions like respiratory diseases, as I mentioned, and nearly 500 million children globally now reside in regions experiencing at least double the extreme hot days as compared to the 1960s. So again, we are seeing a rise in severity, high heat days. And so as you can see, this is the heat index from weather.gov. So we're typically aware of the heat index and how and can reference it to see if there's a good choice for children to spend extended periods of time outdoors. And so this is looking at relative humidity in comparison to temperature because when it's more humid, we're obviously more sensitive to temperature as well. So if children are exposed to direct sunlight and the heat index can be increased by up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's also something to consider is shade versus direct sunlight as well. So, in a study that was published, they looked at 103 public playgrounds to understand surface to air temperature. So, looking at how different surfaces on those play structures or outdoor spaces affect overall temperature. And it was found that natural surfaces like grass or soil or mulch help keep temperatures lower actually than artificial surfaces like concrete or maybe the crumb rubber. Um, which can actually elevate surface temperatures higher. So even the type of surfacing outdoors matters when it comes to heat exposure. And then also, exposed playground slides, rubber, and artificial turf are the leading culprits of burns when it comes to outdoor play. Because these surfaces get so hot and they can tend to be a little bit abrasive, and children's skin is, very, very delicate and permeable. Um, some of these materials can reach dangerously high temperatures and cause burns on children's skin in as little as 3 seconds. So you can use an industrial or consumer infrared surface thermometer. So those are the thermometers that you can use to scan from a distance. You can see a picture of it here on the right. And surface temperatures may be hotter than outdoor temperatures. So even if the air is like, say, 90 degrees, the surface can actually be, 120, 130 degrees. And so consideration as well when there's outdoor play happening, particularly in direct sunlight, can make a big difference. And so these thermometers that you can use to scan um, are typically around $20. And so when we're thinking about heat-related illness, this graphic specifically talks about adults. It's kind of a progression. And so as you're noticing symptoms, it's important to act as quickly as possible because it can progress really quickly and become very serious. And so here you see that it transitions from heat stress, which is the most mild example of a heat-related illness, where signs and symptoms are moderate physiological distress, hot skin sensation, profuse sweating, maybe even a heat-related rash with the sweating. Um, and then it moves to heat exhaustion, where there's maybe muscle weakness or cramps, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, fainting, fatigue, headaches. And then heat stroke, which is the most severe type of heat-related illness, where there's abnormally high body temperature of 103 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, hot, dry skin, so no longer sweating, cardiovascular symptoms such as increased heart rate, altered mental state, so maybe feeling a little bit loopy, headaches, and loss of consciousness. So very important to be able to recognize these, even for adults. And especially considering with chronic conditions, heat extremes can worsen risks with those chronic conditions as well. So, including respiratory diseases, as I mentioned before, somebody with asthma, we might want to be a little bit more careful when it comes to heat. And yeah, so this is mostly pertaining to adults. But there are also, ways that we can look out for these different related symptoms for children as well. So, in terms of heat safety, there's some tips on the left-hand side over here, like never leaving children in a parked car, dressing in loose, lightweight, light-colored clothing, making sure that children are hydrated, scheduling outdoor activities for parts of the day, like morning and evenings where it's not full sun, and choosing activities that are less likely to cause overheating. Um, Playing maybe where there's water or running through sprinklers, so there's something that's cooling the children off. But again, with heat exhaustion, you can look out for symptoms like dizziness, nausea, vomiting, muscle cramps, skin cold or clammy to the touch. And so that's a little bit of a difference that you would see with children than adults. And then what you can do is bring them to a colder place to sit or lie down, apply a cool wet cloth or water to the skin, give water to drink, and gently stretch sore muscles. And something that I was told a while ago that I found surprising about heat-related illness is that you don't need to necessarily worry about like making it too cold too fast if someone is experiencing heat-related illness. You know, I think a lot of people think that they need to like transition to a cooler space. You really just want to cool off as quickly and as much as possible. And so especially with children, if that means cold water or moving them into an air-conditioned room just as quickly as you possibly can, cooling them off, is what you want to do so that it doesn't progress. And then with heat stroke, which again is the more severe heat-related illness, you'll see symptoms like sleepiness, confusion, high fever, and then that hot, dry skin where there's no longer sweating, it's just extremely hot skin. And so in that scenario, you want to involve emergency services by calling 911, bringing a cooler to the place to sit or lie down, removing excess clothing, and applying a cool, wet cloth of water to the skin, as well as giving water to drink. So if you expect that someone is having heat stroke, again, it's very important to involve emergency services and call 911. It can be very severe, and you want to move as quickly as possible to prevent as much damage as you can. Moving the person to an air-conditioned cooler or room or a shady area if those aren't available to you, wetting the person's skin with water or applying ice packs to their armpits, groin, neck, and back area as those, have the most blood flow and so they'll be able to cool down the body most efficiently. And if the person loses consciousness, begin CPR as well. So with that, I'm going to move on to safer sunscreen and bug repellents. And so with sunscreen, we see mainly two different types that are based on whatever ingredient is actively being used to block sun exposure. And so those two active ingredients are mineral and chemical filters, and each uses a different mechanism for protecting the skin. The most common sunscreens on the market use chemical filters, and these products typically include a combination of the following different chemicals that you can see on your screen, like oxybenzone, avobenzone, octisalate, um, and the rest that you can see. And then mineral filters, these are ones that people are typically familiar with. You'll see zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. And so with these mineral sunscreens, some broad spectrum products combine zinc oxide and chemical filters together. So you might also see those types of sunscreens as well. And current research shows that zinc oxide and titanium dioxide can safely be used in sunscreen and lotions and pose a lower health hazard risk than most other sunscreens. So between the two chemical filters and mineral filters, we would typically opt for mineral filters over chemical filters, especially as chemical sunscreens have been found to be associated with hormone disruption. Disrupting the body's hormones, which especially for children is super important to prevent. Um, and some of these different chemicals can penetrate deep into the skin. And for this, we would opt for mineral filters over chemical filters. However, we also want to acknowledge that often the safest option is wearing lightweight, long sleeve pants. Or wearing a hat if you plan to be out in the sun, and often, combining those strategies. So, wearing that lightweight, natural fiber clothing when you can, and also combining it with a sunscreen can provide the most protection. And so here are some do's and don'ts that we have for sunscreens and what we can do to provide the most protection. So do use mineral-based sunscreens, use lotions or sunscreen sticks, so things that you're rubbing into the skin, trying to avoid those sprays and particularly aerosol sprays. So the sprays that, come in kind of the metal can and make a like noise when you spray. And that's because aerosols in general break down whatever substance is in the can into really small droplets that can be readily inhaled. And so we probably don't want to be inhaling sunscreen, so we try to stay away from aerosols as much as possible. Also, for children, having adults apply sunscreen to children and applying sunscreen first and then waiting 5 to 10 minutes to apply bug spray if you plan to use the two together. We recommend that you avoid sunscreen with chemical filters, aerosol containers, as I just explained, SPF higher than 50. For SPF, 50 is kind of like the gold standard. Anything over that is not going to provide you much additional protection. So that's why SPF 50 is what we recommend. Avoid products that combine bug spray and sunscreen. If you're using both, you want to use two different products separately and wait 5 minutes between applying sunscreen to applying bug spray, as I said, and applying sunscreen before you apply bug spray. And then avoiding sunscreen on infants under 6 months old For infants, you just want to keep them out of direct sun, as opposed to applying sunscreen on them. So then for insect repellents, we recommend trying non-chemical methods first. So dressing children in long pants and long sleeves when outdoors, using mosquito netting, avoiding areas where insects breed or congregate. So standing water is typically where mosquitoes, um, breed and where they tend to stay. So they typically don't travel far from that standing water. So especially, around your home, if you have an outdoor space, looking for places that have standing water and eliminating them can actually bring down the mosquitoes that you encounter in that area by a good amount. Also avoiding clothing with bright colors or flowery prints. Not using scented soaps or perfumes, as those can sometimes attract insects as well. Getting rid of those containers that have standing water. And then also remembering that repellents have pretty much no effect on certain insects like bees, hornets, and wasps. And so we recognize that, we can't avoid bug repellent all the time. Sometimes it is very necessary. Being in a hot and humid area, definitely I use my I use a decent share of bug spray, particularly in those hot summer months. And so, again, avoiding products that combine sunscreen and repellent, following label instructions, so making sure that you read how often you have to apply, where you should and shouldn't be applying it. If you're going to be using sunscreen as well, applying sunscreen first, following with a repellent, and then not allowing children to handle repellents themselves. So that means keeping them in a safe space where children cannot easily access them, and then applying the bug spray yourself and not having children apply it to themselves.
He gave it to me personally. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And so when you're using insect repellents, also remembering not to apply to children's hands, avoiding aerosols or using pumps. So using pump sprays instead. So again, aerosols will be the one that almost is like reminiscent of a spray paint can. And so going for ones that are more of that pump, and so it only sprays when you're pressing down like that. And then when you return indoors, washing hands and skin that's been treated with bug spray, with soap and water, and always storing insect repellents safely out of reach of children. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Jess.
All right, thanks, Ellie. We're gonna mix it up so you guys don't get bored. So I'm going to continue on with the safer choice bug repellents. So again, we want to recommend that you do not use bug repellents on infants under 6 months old. They don't necessarily have the ability to metabolize some of the things that they're coming into contact with. So it's just safer to try to do other methods to keep them away from different types of insects. So you can use fine netting over strollers, or maybe fine netting if you have a baby carrier, can put it over them to help do a physical barrier instead of adding some sort of chemical to them. So three of the repellents, and there are a lot of EPA registered active ingredients, but the ones that I'm picking out today are deep carbon IR 33535. They have been shown as effective to repel mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. The thing you need to be aware of whenever you're selecting which type of insect repellent you're looking at are the concentrations. So if you're going to be outside, like think you're at a childcare and you're going to be outside for 45 minutes, you could consider using a lower concentration. Just that way the child is less exposed to a higher load of chemicals, versus if you're going to be backpacking, hiking, camping, then you might want to think about using a higher percentage outdoors. So again, we want to be aware of are being applied and try to use the lowest amount that's effective. Next slide. All right. Okay. Benefits of shade. So one of the things that we do understand is that there are a lot of benefits to having shade in the environment. This can help reduce exposure to direct sunlight, and it lowers the risk of heat exhaustion and sunburn. It can also lower the UV radiation exposure by up to 75%. So that can help prevent long-term skin damage. And it can reduce playground temperatures by 20 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So this can make playing outdoor actually an option when the weather is hotter. A study by Women for a Healthy Environment found that access to shade offered an average of 6 degrees in temperature reduction, and this provided 15 minutes longer in safe extended playtime. And then go into the sun, and it is an extreme difference. And there has been a link to the amount of UV radiation exposure and sunburns in children and developing melanoma later in life. And so we do want to be very protective of our kids' skin. Next. Okay. There are a lot of different types of shade structures and different levels of cost associated with each of them. So there are permanent structures. So those can be things like gazebos, pergolas, and pavilion style roofs. There can also be fabric shade cells. These are usually pretty cost effective. They're flexible for playgrounds and outdoor learning spaces. We would recommend the kind that you can unhook and take in if it's really windy, if you're getting like a big storm coming in. You can also get the ones that are cemented into the ground, but that is quite an expense. We do our favorite thing, of course, as we're dealing with children's environmental health, and as pretty sure most of y'all would agree, are tree canopies and planting more trees. These will provide natural cooling and long-term environmental health benefits. The only issue with this is that trees don't necessarily grow as rapidly as we might need them. But I wanted to point out some of these structures here. We had our national director going to educare facilities. And so the picture on the left and the picture on the right are all examples of ways that they are using shade in order to enhance play areas, so that way the children can spend more time outdoors. Another thing that you can look into doing is using misters and cooling stations. So misting systems, they can be installed in playgrounds, parks, or schoolyards, and these provide a fine water mist for cooling. So some of the huge misting stations are pretty price prohibitive for some organizations, but there are smaller options that you can get at your local home goods store or home improvement store. And those are less expensive and still provide just kind of the same mist there. We also recommend having cooling stations. So having a little table set up in a shaded area that can have some of the little fans, can have ice water for the kids to drink, because we want them to be able to have access to water at any time whenever they're outdoors. So just a little area that they can go and sit in the shade and, get a cool drink to calm down and rest. But one of the things you have to remember if you're going to be using these portable misters is that a lot of them are designed with PVC or BPA plastics. And so as they're sitting outside, if there's water stuck in there and they're sitting outside with the heat coming onto them, that is going to make some of the chemicals leach into the water. And I'm pretty sure if anybody has seen a child with these misting systems, they're going to try to drink it. So if that is an option that you choose to do, make sure that you run the water for a few minutes, the cool water for a few minutes until it cools down and helps flush some of those chemicals out. So that way we're at least reducing the amount of chemicals that the children are exposed to. Okay. So for shade design, the best practices are to try to figure out where the shade can sit for 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. because those are the hottest parts of the day. So that will provide the most relief for the children. If you are going to get some of the fabric shade cells, then looking for UV resistant fabric or reflective materials to help reflect the sunlight off instead of absorbing it in and it getting really hot. And one thing you need to keep in mind, I've seen pictures of childcare facilities where they have shade, but all of the toys are in the sun. And so children are going to want to be where the fun is. And if the fun is in direct sunlight, they will sit there and just get hot because the toy that they want to play with is there. So being mindful of putting toys in the shaded area to attract the children there. Another idea, and this is one that I personally did with my kids, and they had a great time doing this, but we had a planter and we put a bunch of rocks in it. We did get a small PVC pipe that was big enough to fit a beach umbrella. And so with that, we were able to create a little portable shade structure that you could kind of wiggle around the house, wiggle around the yard and move to whichever position that you wanted to be wherever we were working. If we're in the garden, we could scooch it over. If they're played in the sandbox, we could scooch it over. So that was something that probably cost about $30 to create this. So that is something that you can use, and it's more mobile than some of these fixed structures that we had recommended earlier. All right, so this is one of the resources that I frequent whenever I'm looking at playgrounds and trying to think about um, the best way to recommend things for some of our childcare facilities. So this is designing climate ready playgrounds, and it's from a national program. All of their resources are free, and it just gives you some things that you can think about as you're moving forward. If you're trying to redo your outdoor space or trying to create something that would be more beneficial to children as far as safety and considering shade and considering how the weather is going to change in the future. This one provides a pretty good overview of it. And again, it's free. So it's one of the many resources you might want to use whenever you're designing your area. All right, so we have some outdoor play ideas, and these are some of the ideas that I tried with my children. So this is my daughter here. So what we did is we have a whole bunch of outdoor chalk that we use, and we have little chunks of it everywhere that aren't really big enough for little hands. So what we did was I crushed all of those, and I added a mixture of cornstarch and warm water, and then added the leftover chalk and made it to like a syrup consistency. And then the kids were able to use their paintbrushes, and they could go out and they tried to do a hopscotch. It didn't work because my daughter kind of infiltrated my son's work. Um, but I mean, it'll come off either with the rain, or you can use just a high pressure. So it is just chalk. The cornstarch just makes it be a little bit thicker and brighter. They really had fun with that. And you can also use this paint if you have leftover and freeze it and put popsicle sticks in it. And then if it's super hot outside, they can go and hold the little frozen popsicle sticks and do chalk ice water art. So we haven't got to that point yet, but they had fun with this portion of it. Next slide. They had a lot of fun with this one too. So this was treasure hunt ice cubes. We split it into two different activities. So the first one was going outside and finding different things from nature and putting them in ice cube trays. And so from that, after, of course, they got all kinds of messy. So this was after bath time. They decided to do this portion. But then you just fill them all up with water, and then you freeze them. So one activity is finding all of the different things, and we were able to talk about different plants and seeds, and we found bugs, and it was just a whole afternoon that we had of doing this. And then you can freeze it, and then the next time you can get turkey basters, droppers, paint. There's also been versions that I've seen of this where you can take little toys and do similar things or put them in a huge bowl. And so this is just an activity where it's cold. If it's hot outside, this is something tactile, physical that they can do where, you know, things are a little bit cooler and cool to the touch to help cool them off. Okay, so a few of the other ideas that I was able to research and find are a car wash. So this is just you get different small items, and maybe you have sand and you get them all dirty, and then you can get some soap and water or use your water table or buckets, and then they can just go in with little brushes and clean it off. So this will keep them busy for a while, and it's something fun to do where they're playing with water but not necessarily getting fully submerged. I mean, I can't promise that they won't, but that's the idea. There's also Duck Duck Splash, which is the Duck Duck Goose game, but you give them a spray bottle and they can spray their friend with water and then run around. Another creative way to keep them cool. There's also, for an educational component, you can do sight word and sight letter splash, where you write whatever words they're learning, or maybe whatever letters they're working with, and you can give them a gun and they can run over to it. and squirt a water gun on it, or they can get a little cup of water or put something on it to let them know that they're recognizing the word. So that's another way to play with water, but also have an educational component. There are sponge races you can do. So using compressed cellulose sponges, and you can have a few buckets and have the children line up, and they can get the sponges wet in one bucket and run to the other one and squeeze out the water and see who wins that way. It's another way for water play. And this was an interesting one that my son had tried, which is the build a dam and explore water flow, where you can use aluminum foil. And so it's aluminum foil, you've got like a cardboard box, and you kind of make a little river. And so they can put different, natural components on it, leaves, whatever they want to do like that. Pour water in it and just kind of splash around. And that also will give you a water feature that you can move into the shade if you need to. And there's also stick soup is a popular game in our house, where you go outside and you find different things and you mix a little potion with leaves, sticks, flowers, anything that you can find. So that's been popular. Okay. So another concept that we like to share with providers is that you can eat your water. So if you have children, you're trying to give them water and maybe they just don't like water because they're used to juice or whatever the case may be, keep in mind that there are some high water content snacks that you could offer them. On the left, you'll see the percentage of water in each of these items. So, it's a good amount of water in some of these things. And I know personally, my kids really like frozen watermelon and frozen cut up grapes. So that's just kind of another idea that you can use, just a tool in your toolbox of trying to make sure that they stay hydrated. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit now about outdoor air quality, because even if we do want to stay outside as much as possible, there's going to be days when that may not be an option in regards to safety for the children or the adults. So within our checklist that Ellie had mentioned earlier, we do recommend that childcare facilities check airnow.gov every day to try to see what the air quality is and just keep it in mind as you are going outdoors. So I live in Fort Worth, so this is what this looked like. I think it was Wednesday of this week here. So we're already getting into some poor quality air for the North Texas region, which is unfortunate. But this website will it'll show you the air quality index. It will give you wildfire smoke maps, and it's got health guidance and just different air quality. We do recommend in the morning because the concentrations of PM 2.5 and some of these other components usually are lower earlier in the day versus in the late afternoon when everybody's going home and driving, and we're seeing more of the pollution. Next. Okay, the next one that we have is Purple Air. So these are low-cost monitors that people have, and they will either put them inside their home or outside their home or business. And this can give you a better idea of what is going on locally, because the airnow.gov is based on EPA sensors, which those are not necessarily right in the area where you live. Whereas if you look at Purple Air, you might be able to find an outdoor air monitor that is closer to you to give you a better idea of what's going on. So this is something that we're using for one of our research projects. It's been super helpful. People like going and seeing what their local air quality is. And so that's another avenue that you can go. So if you are in a wildfire prone area, or that you're having an ozone action day, one of the things that you can do is purchase an air purifier for your organization. So we recommend a HEPA filter. There are different variations of HEPA filters, but really as long as it's a HEPA filter, it's going to be helpful. And this will help remove dust, pollen, mold, bacteria, and particulate matter 2.5. And this just helps keep the indoor air cleaner, because if the outdoor air is not clean and you're doing things indoors where the indoor air is not clean, we want to keep that in mind to try to remove the amount of chemicals and particulate matter in the air, just to provide a safe space indoors versus just being stuck indoors with not very good air quality. So this is another super cute idea. We've seen this became popular around COVID time, I think, but it's a Corsi Rosenthal box, and this is a DIY situation, and there have been a lot of ways that people decorate it. So if you're having an air quality event and you're looking for a project to do, and maybe you have older kids, this might be something that you want to do. It'll keep you indoors, keep you busy, and it'll actually functionally clean your air. And the next slide will show you a little bit of what it is. It's really simple. It's just 4 air filters and a box fan and some cardboard and some tape. And there is a QR code if you'd want to look this up and try to make this one of your projects for when the air quality is pretty bad. We can recommend that. All right. Also talking about indoor air quality, you want to make sure that the indoor humidity is between 30 and 50 degrees. So if you're walking into a building or your childcare facility and you kind of smell a musty smell, there could be an issue with the humidity in the air. And so a hygrometer is a great way to kind of understand what's going on in your environment and to see if the humidity is too high, and then you might need to take some sort of action, because keeping humidity in a healthy range will improve air quality and reduce health risk for children. It can also reduce the risk of mold growing. So that is something we want to keep in mind as kids are stuck indoors during some of these air quality events. So one thing that if you are finding that you're having a lot of humidity, you can use a dehumidifier. There are a variety of dehumidifiers on the market. So if you are feeling that musty feeling or smelling that musty smell, this is something that can help reduce humidity in the air. And again, it would help reduce the likelihood that mold spores or black spots or anything like that will appear in your area. So there are a few resources here. We've been focusing more on extreme weather resources for childcare facilities, because as we're seeing these extreme weather events, it's some of these things people just really aren't prepared for, or they don't know how to prepare for. So there are resources available. A lot of these are focused towards childcare facilities themselves. It's just a way to emergency plan and things that you might need to think of. If you're going to need to get an emergency bag or things like that ready, it gives you considerations, who you need to talk to, how you need to plan. It's a wealth of information that is available for this. Okay. So that is our presentation, and we are super happy to be here. If anybody has any questions, we'd be more than happy to ask or to answer them. And if somebody is reviewing this later on from the recording, feel free to email us. Let us know if you have any questions or concerns. But yeah, we look forward to working with y'all, and I hope you guys find our resources helpful.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jessica and Ellie? Any resources, anything that you're looking for that they might be able to point you in the right direction? Good. Well, thank you for all this wonderful information today. It's so helpful as we get into the heat season. And the activities sound like a lot of fun. It's about playing with water when you're out there and keeping cool. And I love the idea of having the cooling station outdoors. Having water set up in a shaded area, having the fans. You might even have watermelon out there too, for the children to grab as needed. So wonderful ideas for today. I did shoot a survey into the chat. If you would take just a moment to fill that out. And then if there aren't any more questions, we can give you a few minutes back from your Saturday. So thank you all for being here. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions if you have them.
Thank you all so much for having us.
Absolutely. And some of their resources are on the Pathfinder resources section of the website of the EC Network website. So you'll see some one-sheeters there that you can print out from a CEHN. And then can we share your slides too?
Yes,
At
absolutely.
least the ones with the links to resources.
Yeah, that's fine.
That'd be
We can
great.
send, yeah, we can send you a PDF.
Okay, then I'll send all that out to you all within the next week or so. All righty. So I'll give you one more minute to do the survey and then we can let everybody go. Good. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Kristen.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here, Felicia. And then I think our next webinar is June 3rd. And it is resources too for getting children outdoors. It's at 2 o'clock. And you can find the link to register for that one on our website too. All righty. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.